Whether a landlord or a tenant in a commercial lease arrangement, the chances are that you will need to deal with dilapidations, most commonly as a result of the tenant's failure to adhere to their lease clauses in order to protect the value of the landlord's asset. Commonly, at around lease end, a landlord will instruct their surveyor to prepare a schedule of dilapidations, which is a document which will often form the basis of a financial settlement between the landlord and the tenant to compensate for the tenant's lease breaches. This is, however, only the first stage of a process designed to get to the bottom of whether a landlord really has suffered a loss, and if so, to quantify this loss. I'm Tim Clarke, Chartered Building Surveyor and Managing Director at Harris & Clarke Chartered Surveyors, and I will be considering a pragmatic approach to settling dilapidations disputes. Firstly, no video on this issue could fail to clarify that there are two key pieces of guidance when it comes to dilapidations. This is such a common type of disagreement that the courts have produced a structure for settling dilapidations disputes. Formally, this is known as the Pre-Action Protocol for claims for damages in relation to the physical state of commercial property at termination of a tenancy. Since this hasn't been incredibly snappily named, more often than not, this is known as the Dilapidations Protocol. The protocol sets out a series of steps to be taken by each party, along with some suggested timescales. The purpose of the Dilapidations Protocol is to encourage early agreement on as many items as possible, such that in the unlikely event a dilapidations dispute proceeds to trial, the court is tasked with deciding as little as possible, freeing up court time. If a party at trial fails to adhere to the protocol's requirements, this will be considered only at costs stage. While it's important to take heed of the protocol's requirements, there is little to no prospect of many claims proceeding to trial, so while I would never say that the protocol should be ignored, there is in reality little benefit about getting excited about things like the 56 and 28-day deadlines, and in reality, these deadlines are often missed for a number of reasons. The other principled guidance is a document from the RICS entitled Dilapidations in England and Wales. We are currently on the 7th edition. This is slightly more nuts and boltsy and sets out best practice formats for presenting dilapidations claims and responses, and clarifies that both the courts and RICS encourage dialogue between parties to a dispute. So, in a nutshell, as with any dispute, the best way to find a resolution is through dialogue. I don't want to shortchange you by ending the video there though, so let's explore what this means in practice. It is of course possible that the landlord will be able to speak to the tenant and for them both to reach a compromise that both sides is happy with. Whenever I've seen this happen in practice, from an academic perspective at least, normally an inequitable settlement is arrived upon and one party, often the tenant, ends up with a loss greater than they should. In London, dilapidations claims can involve large numbers, and so even a skew of a few percentage points could mean the loss of thousands of pounds for the affected party. I would always recommend that parties appoint their own dilapidations surveyor to act as their advocate and to discuss matters between themselves. This will improve parity of information on both sides, as both sides should, in theory at least, have a detailed understanding of the dilapidations process. The two experienced surveyors entering into dialogue should end up with a settlement that a court would endorse without the high costs that court-decided disputes entail. As a side note, you need to do your homework and make sure you're appointing a true dilapidations specialist, and that dilapidations isn't just a service line occasionally dusted off by the surveyor involved. Initially, the surveyors will consider each item in a schedule of dilapidations individually and assess whether those items have led to the landlord suffering a loss. They will document their thoughts in a Scott schedule, which is essentially a spreadsheet which grows each time a party adds their notes to it. This is a great way to find common ground, and it is easy to see from a Scott schedule where the areas of contention remain. If the surveyors feel they are reaching a deadlock, they will need to meet in person, ideally on site. This type of meeting is always on a without prejudice basis, as it's important for surveyors to be able to speak freely, increasing the likelihood of common ground being found. It's amazing how a keyboard warrior can turn into a comparative pussycat during a face-to-face meeting. It is usual that no matter how much common ground can be found, there might be a couple of areas where the surveyors simply cannot agree. In this instance, I will always discuss with the client their current position and help them to understand the risks of failing to compromise. Many clients simply want the dispute over and done with so we can prepare a proposal which we think might be palatable to the other side. Alternatively, sometimes it's clear that one party has the upper hand. Depending on whether my client has the upper hand, advice may be to dig in our heels or put the ball into the other party's court. If not, it may be time to dust off the checkbook to bring matters to a conclusion. There is no one-size-fits-all in dilapidations, and surveyors need to be adaptable to fit in with their client's appetite for risk, as well as explaining to them what the risks of various negotiation strategies might be. So, in conclusion, as with any dispute, dialogue is important, but it is useful to recognise that when surveyors discuss dilapidations disputes, their dialogue is highly process-driven, an approach that allows equitable settlements that, in theory at least, a court would be willing to support. This process means that parties to a dilapidations dispute in London can be confident that their interests are being well represented and that an equitable settlement has been reached. Of course, some settlements can be more equitable than others if you have the right surveyor on your side. If you need help in negotiating a dilapidation settlement, our team of specialist dilapidation surveyors can be reached on 020 81 53 1233. We look forward to discussing your dilapidations issues with you.